Once upon a time, when I was 30, I was a big truck driver. This happened quite a few years ago. My story begins in Ohio, where I landed a job and turned out to be the only girl and the youngest of all drivers. And did I mention my boss, Winston? He was the one who brought me on board, and he was rather taken aback when I chose to work so far from my home turf in sunny California. You see, I was dealing with a messy breakup and some family drama, so the farther I could get, the better. Winston thought it'd be good for me to work alongside another driver, a fellow named Dallas, for my training. Dallas was a retired soldier and a bit on the grumpy side, but Winston promised me he was a real straight shooter. However, I felt my personal space invaded as Dallas often stepped over the line with his inappropriate behavior. I was frightened, feeling like a prisoner in that massive truck with him. One day, I decided enough was enough and reached out for help. A wonderful woman named Gladys came to my rescue. After going through that petrifying experience, I decided to hang up my truck driving gloves for good. Today, I sit behind a desk in an office building, and boy do I hope never to cross paths with Dallas again. I found myself cruising westward on I-70 right here in our beloved Denver. My speedometer was tapping around the 70-mile-per-hour mark when, without any forewarning, I spotted a colossal wall of what I suspected was dust. The cloud was mammoth, nearly 20 feet in width and towering about 10 feet above the ground. As I peered into the distance, not a single vehicle from which this could have originated was in sight. With nowhere to turn, I decided to slow my pace and brace myself to face the dusty onslaught. My only hope was that there wouldn't be anything large or solid enough concealed within to shatter my windshield or wreak havoc on my truck. I could hear an intense sound as I plowed through the cloud. Then, I realized that what I had come into contact with was certainly not mere dirt. Panicked, I quickly hit the washers as visibility dropped radically due to whatever unknown mess now coated my windscreen. To my utter shock, the debris was no ordinary sludge. It was a massacre of guts. In disbelief, I soon discovered the intruders were no ordinary bugs, but massive bees. Their impact felt akin to hitting rocks at my speed. I can't even begin to comprehend the sight of this swarm up close, on foot. I'm certain they'd pose a deadly threat to anyone unfortunate enough to cross their path. Let me tell you a story about my dad, who wasn't a truck driver but found himself in a heart-pounding situation with one during the 1970s. At that time, my dad was just an 18-year-old working night shifts at a gas station that operated 24/7. One fateful night, an unpleasant customer walked in, and my dad could tell something wasn't right. It was as clear as day that this guy was hiding something in his trousers, and my father's immediate thought was that he had a gun. Truck drivers often frequented gas stations for two simple reasons. Firstly, we had a spacious parking area where the truckers could rest and relax. Secondly, we were the only source of food for miles around. Usually, the parking lot would be filled with up to 10 trucks, but on this particular night, only one truck was parked. However, the driver of that truck happened to be in the store along with my dad. As this suspicious-looking man wandered aimlessly around the store, my dad couldn't shake off the feeling that he was up to no good. But he didn't know how to handle the situation or even if the trucker would be of any help. All he could think of was this stranger pulling a gun on him and robbing the place. While this happened, the truck driver came to the counter, bought a bag of chips, and noticed the uneasy situation. A silent understanding passed between the trucker and my dad, followed by a seemingly casual conversation about the safety of working alone at gas stations, and the guns they kept for protection. Playing along with this charade, my dad mentioned he had a .45 right here with him, always within arm's reach. The trucker didn't miss a beat, and joined in, talking about his imaginary .357 Magnum and how he wished someone would dare mess with him. At the end of this conversation, our suspicious customer hurriedly left the premises, got into his car, and disappeared down the highway. Once the guy was gone, the truck driver looked at my dad and confirmed his suspicion that the guy was planning to rob the place. He advised my dad to call the cops and decided to stay around until they arrived. He spent his entire break chatting with my dad and stood by him when the police arrived to confirm the situation. Suddenly, amid the discussion, both police radios started buzzing, and they rushed out of the gas station, speeding down the highway with their lights and sirens blaring. The trucker only had one thing to say: "I hope our friend and his gun didn't find the trouble they were looking for." But sadly, he did. The next day, my dad read in the newspaper that the same suspicious customer had robbed another gas station down the highway. The owner of that station valiantly tried to resist, but tragically lost his life in the process. It made my dad realize how close he had come to losing his own life that night. Luckily, the robber was caught and faced justice. Every time my dad narrates the story, he mentions how the criminal deserved what he deserved. It reminds me how grateful I am that the incident didn't end differently. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here today to share the story. This encounter reaffirms my belief in guardian angels, who sometimes appear as hairy truckers, and strengthens my belief in divine justice. I've spent all my life working in labor-intensive jobs with special attention to my time as a truck driver in the early 2000s. Imagine this, a job offer so irresistible that it included full pay for part-time hours, provided you met the delivery times. And just like that, I found myself a certified truck driver, brimming with excitement and on the open road within a month. During my stint, I encountered numerous odd and peculiar situations, but there's one experience that trumps everything else. This story is anything but dull, so let's cut to the chase. Picture this, a return journey from Oregon to Minnesota, halfway through with a jovial mood and beautiful weather. My trucking routine was simple, drive without exhausting myself, with a focus on wholesome meals, exercise, and a consistent sleep schedule. The reason is that I have a heart condition that makes caffeine a no-go for me. Life made more sense when it was all natural, so I used homemade remedies to keep my energy levels high. Driving through Montana's expansive beauty, heading towards a secluded tracking station nestled between Bozeman and Livingston, everything seemed on track, at least initially. After grabbing a quick bite at Bozeman and getting back on the road, I noticed a rest station beside my truck was empty. Being alone in such a place brought a sense of peace to me. After a day's work, I retired to the simple living space in the back of my cab, complete with a small table and bed. Embracing the comfort of heavy blankets and pillows, I turned on a portable DVD player, one of those trendy 2000s inventions, and settled in to watch an action movie. Hours into my sleep, a sudden noise woke me. I assumed it was just me snoring loudly, as I do sometimes. But when I heard what sounded like a cough outside my cab, I switched on the overhead light, triggering the sound of footsteps racing away. Upon investigating, I noticed an old van parked across the lot. I tried to reassure myself that it was just another long-haul driver. Still, subsequent noises and the sound of my truck door handle being tugged made it clear that my unwanted visitor had other intentions. I'm not confrontational, but I decided it was time to confront this intruder. With my trusty flashlight, I found boot tips peeking out from behind the van. After an uncomfortable few moments, the boots disappeared altogether. Seeing my truck wasn't abandoned, I hoped the stranger would move on, but sleep was elusive and I couldn't shake off the eerie feeling. Suddenly, I woke up to the distinct noise of a man clearing his throat right outside my door. Peering through the window, I saw a man with an odd homemade haircut and possibly shaved eyebrows, staring intently into my cab. What ensued was a disturbing conversation where the intruder, who called himself Jake, started expressing his sexual fantasies. The situation took a more sinister turn as Jake began to share his desire for violent sexual encounters, culminating in him smacking his fist against the glass. In a bid to scare him off, I shone a light on my face, pretending to call the police while bluffing about noting down his vehicle's plate. At my stern warning, Jake quickly retreated, driving away in his van without switching his headlights. In the safety of daybreak, I considered contacting the police, but eventually decided against it. Only after I quit trucking did I realize how common such encounters were, especially in the world of late-night truck stops. I'm not someone who drives a double-trailer truck across the country, but I do deliver goods around my beloved Maine in my small flatbed truck. And yes, I have a spine-chilling tale to share with you. On a night during the frosty winter of 2008, I was navigating my truck through a dimly lit road after sundown. Now, winters here are gloomier, and the journey between towns is even more so. The roads are often so dark that relying solely on the hazy truck headlights to illuminate the path ahead is a usual occurrence. So, imagine how frightened I must have felt when suddenly, right in my path, a man appeared. I swerved just in time to avoid him, and trust me when I say it was a close shave. I could recognize details as I drove by him, like his Coptic eyes. Yes, it was that close. But there's more to note about this strange man. He was dressed entirely in white, almost as if he was cloaked in eerie white makeup. Oddly, his skin tone, even his bald head, mirrored the same deathly white hue. Upon stopping the truck, I bolted out to check on him. With the proximity of passing, I feared that I might have grazed him, but as I retraced my steps, I was met with an empty road. And I assure you it was not a ghost, as many have speculated. I'm not one to deny the existence of the paranormal, but this wasn't it. I heard him scamper off into the fields adjacent to the road, but saw no trace of him. Whatever his intentions were, an odd attempt at suicide or something else, I thank the heavens that I didn't hit him. because that is an incident that would have haunted me forever, more than the sighting itself. When I just started trucking, I had a lot of wrong ideas about the world. I was young, naive, and had no clue about what was to come. But luckily, life on the road is packed with wise old truckers who've seen it all and made all the mistakes, so we don't have to. Every time I stopped, whether for a cup of joe or a quick bathroom break, an old-timer would be there to advise me on how to plan routes better, manage my time, handle the wheel, you name it. It was frustrating, but every now and then, they'd offer useful tips that saved my skin. One adventure still stands out. I landed in hot water but managed to steer clear thanks to some of those handy tips. I won't mention the state just to keep some privacy, but I'll tell you it was somewhere north, parallel to the Canadian border. It was late in the afternoon, and I found myself driving through a small township of about 11,000 people. As I was exiting the town, I noticed a girl hitchhiking. It was cold, the sun was setting, and she was wearing shorts without a coat. I recalled the many warnings from old-timers about the dangers of picking up hitchhikers, but the cold and her vulnerability made me put the pedal on the brakes. I soon realized my mistake. The girl, who introduced herself as Katie, was younger than I thought, maybe 16. I wasn't up to anything fishy, but I was puzzled as to why she was there. Her story of losing track of her friends and trying to hitchhike her way home didn't completely convince me. Despite the doubts, I let her hop in, and off we went. We were heading for the next town when we noticed something on the road. 3 people lying across 2 lanes. My mind raced as I tried to make sense of it. Was it an accident, a crime? But Katie's odd reaction clued me in. This was some dangerous stuff. The old-timer's warnings echoed in my head. Never stop for people acting weird on the road. They're likely to hurt you. I decided not to stop and kept driving into the darkness. Katie's reaction confirmed my suspicions. She'd been a part of this, and my good intentions had landed me in this mess. As I was thinking about handling this, I saw a police check. As luck would have it, I was cleared of any wrongdoings, and Katie, whose real name was Corey, was taken into custody. She and her friends, it turns out, were runaways from a local girls' detention center and were planning to ambush any unsuspecting motorist who fell for their trap. That night, I learned my lesson and vowed never to stop for hitchhikers again, no matter how desperate they seemed. I became one of those wise old-timers, always ready with a story or lesson for the next young trucker who pulls up beside me for a cup of joe. The road is full of good and bad adventures, and it takes a certain type of person to handle it all. But for those who do, the freedom and the sense of adventure make it all worth it. If you liked this video, give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more true horror stories.